the Northeast, the Southern California, and the Northern California schools. We operate nationally and are excited to have added the Northeast to our official group of schools that we can provide service and safety programs to. We are obviously talking today about a specific incident that began last night, and as I did this morning, I'll take just a second to summarize the events and how we got to having this conversation right now. There was a threat that was received by LAUSD, and it was actually specifically sent to a board member of the school district, and the threat suggested that there was a possibility that there would be a number of different events that occurred today at various LAUSD schools, including some bombs as well as some active shooters. As that threat was evaluated and assessed, it was determined that it was indeed a credible threat, and as a result, the school district decided to go ahead and close school today. When the school district decided to set up the closure, there was a bit of challenge and a bit of confusion as to what other schools and what other organizations should do. And as a result, there was some communication that occurred very early this morning. In fact, as buses were just getting started between about 6:30 and 7, that began this dialogue between us and the LAPD, the LA Unified School District Police Department, and several other organizations. And I'm excited to be able to share with you that as of just about 10 minutes ago, the LA Unified School District's Police Department was completing 95% of the school assessments. And so, again, as of about 10 minutes ago, 95% of the LAUSD schools have been cleared, and it's been determined that there was no actual threat on campus. They are wrapping up the last 5% and are expecting to be done in the next couple of hours. And I'm excited to share with you that as of now, it appears as though LAUSD will be back in session tomorrow, as will the bulk of the rest of the schools in the area. The purpose of today's conversation, or this afternoon's conversation, is to not only ensure that you have a complete understanding of the threat received and a full understanding of next steps to take, but also to help you sort of internalize and interpret some of the events that happened today, both the actual threat as well as how your school managed it. And so we'll start today by talking a little bit about why respond and sort of who responded and how, and some of the decision-making sort of processes that were involved. We'll go on today to talk a little bit about communication to families and helping to ensure that we really create a final and good message that can go out and that can help conclude today's events. We'll talk about some do's and don'ts, both for today and for the future. We'll talk a little bit about tomorrow. We'll do a quick reminder on the types of lockdown or the types of response to a human-created emergency. And then we'll also talk about some language to use with your own communities, as well as schools that are not in the Southern California region and were not directly impacted, but some things that you may be able to do to help get the message out, help communicate, and help ensure that you're creating a safer community, perhaps even using this event as the beginning of that conversation. So before we get started, I do want to just take a quick moment to say thank you to our safety consultants that were assembled relatively early this morning and got information out. Our safety consultants were able to contact all of our schools in a matter of minutes, and it was really incredible to see that work. It's very atypical for us to have to actually deliver the message about whether a school should close or open or lock down or not. And so for our consultants to have been able to do that and to do so quickly, it was incredible. So again, a very quick thank you to Mark and the rest of our consultants and the team that he leads. As we started this morning, our recommendation based off of the information that we had from the LAUSD Police Department as well as LAPD suggested that the right decision for the bulk of the schools in the area was to close. We made that recommendation for all of our clients, and our clients, as well as every other school, frankly, had the decision to make. Do we decide to close? Do we decide to stay open? And what we found is that a number of schools did both, or rather did one or the other. So a number of schools closed, a number of you stayed open. And frankly, there wasn't a right or a wrong decision to make there. As it turned out, there has not yet been an event that indicates that either closing was the right decision or staying open was the right decision. But what was really impactful and incredible from my perspective is having been able to have the conversations with several of our schools and even several of the other schools in the area that we don't directly work with, and listening to some of the decision-making sort of conversation that was had about whether or not to close or whether to stay open. And it was really incredible to hear the different perspectives and the different sort of decision-making tools that each school used. And so I'm excited to be able to say that as a result of staying open, there wasn't any sort of compromise or challenge. As a result of being closed, there wasn't any sort of compromise or challenge. And what was actually unique about today is that LAPD interacted with schools that were closed as well as schools that were open, and in both cases gave very favorable remarks and said that it was the right decision either direction. And indeed, so long as the school's administration was on board and made the right decision based on the information that they had, it was the right decision, whichever choice you made. Now, there's this conversation that began today about response and what that means and who responds and how. And what I want to sort of affirm for each of you is that no matter what incident or threat is perceived, whether it's credible or not, whether it's close or far, there is an element of response that's necessary. And again, with the group today, we saw a number, in fact, we saw about 100% of response. Everybody had some type of response, whether it was escalating security or changing the way that dismissal occurred or closing campus altogether. And again, that response is what was necessary. While it turned out today that as of this point, there was not a necessary response, there was actually not anybody that was ever in danger at any point today, that response was necessary in order to ensure that. And so when we ask that question, we say, well, why should we respond if it's not something that's directly related to us? The response doesn't necessarily need to be that full-scale response, but it definitely does need to be an awareness of and a decision for your own school. Now, the follow-up challenge, and this was a question that came up this morning during our conversation, is how do we manage the quote-unquote boy who cried wolf? How do we ensure that we're creating a culture of safety and at the same time not over-engage or over-respond to any situation that comes up? And over-response is something that is a delicate term and even a delicate concept, but there is the ability to respond to something with a conversation to ensure that at the very least that your senior administration or your heads or whatever that group is, the decision-making body for your school, has come to a decision, has been able to come up with a response that makes sense, and then to get that information out. This morning we spoke a little bit about what that final delivery or final communication would be from each of your schools, and our firm recommendation is that there's a voice-recorded message that comes from your head of school. And in just a moment we'll talk through the specific script, and you'll also have that in your inbox shortly. But the concept is that we want to ensure that we get a message out that identifies that the school responded, that identifies that that was done very quickly, that affirms for parents that safety is a top priority, and that identifies the facts as best as possible. It's important to remember that in any emergency that information is going to be fluid, information is going to change, but no matter what, rumors will travel faster than fact. And so it's important to make sure that we're able to control the voice and control the communication that's going out. And that's one of the core purposes of getting this message out. The other is to calm down the community and to ensure that everybody comes back tomorrow feeling comfortable, feeling ready to go, and feeling safe. I can tell you that based on a number of conversations that I had with a handful of different schools today, there were a couple of questions that came up pretty consistently. The first was, should we arm our security guards? And that's a conversation that comes up after nearly every event that occurs. And after nearly every event that occurs, I share with the schools that ask me that question, well, let's talk about it. And I don't make a firm recommendation one way or the other for this particular policy or concept. And the reason for that is that every school is different. Every school has a different culture, a different environment, and a very different need when it comes to arming or not. Regardless, the push that I'd like to share with you, or the piece that I'd like to share with you today, is that if the conversation came up for you, don't allow today's event to be or to create an impulse decision to move forward and arm. Vice versa, if the conversation came up and you were considering disarming your security guards, don't allow today's conversation or today's events to sort of knee-jerk into that decision either. It's important to make the right decision for the community and not to make a decision based off of a single event or a single even series of events. The second piece that came up a lot today was, well, should we cancel school for the rest of the week? We're close enough to winter break, and so barring finals and things like that that may just need to happen, could we or should we just cancel school for the rest of the week and just get through winter break? And I say the same thing. Don't rush to jump into a cancellation. Don't rush to disregard school for the rest of the week. I found that a number of you that asked me that question today sort of buttressed the question with, well, we're almost done with finals anyway, or we've just got a day or two left. Could we do them online? And again, allowing a single event or a single occurrence to force you into a decision is not what I want to push. At the same time, if that feels like the right decision for your community, then it may very well be. So my strong recommendation there is to really weigh the options, ensure that you're not rushing into a decision because it's the easiest or because it seems like it's the fastest way to put this away. And if you're perhaps understanding the theme here, the overall next step is, or overall concept of things not to do is just don't rush. In any of these situations that occur, it's very easy to rush into a decision that makes you feel a little bit better. Perhaps you think that it helps your parents feel a little bit better, but it may or may not, and rushing into it more often than not turns out to be a challenge and a mistake. Now, those are some things that you don't want to do and that I strongly want to push each of you not to do. But at the same time, there are some things that we do want to push and some things that we do want to remind everybody of. The first one is to remind everybody on campus that it's their obligation, their responsibility to ensure that the community is safe and that the community stays safe. Every time that there's an event that occurs, frankly, anywhere in the world, one of the first conversations that we have is, well, if you see something, say something. And that is perhaps some of the most powerful advice that can be given, because almost any time that there's an incident that occurs, there's something that leads up to it, something that allows us to respond to it, whether it's days or months before or just moments before or sometimes even just as it's happening. And so the ability for your community to feel empowered enough to actually say something, and then for that something to be able to travel to the people on campus who need to hear it, are two very distinct steps, but both of them need to happen. I'll talk a little bit later today about some language to use, and really the language that I want to push everybody to use this year and next year and beyond is empowerment, and allowing your staff and your faculty and even your students to be empowered enough to articulate the need to shift what's going on today. If there's a movement restriction that's necessary, whether it's secure campus or shelter in place or lockdown, we want to be able to have anybody on campus be able to articulate that that's a necessity, and again, anybody on campus be able to then actually enact that or start that process. So if it's securing campus or locking down or sheltering in place, it's not enough for one person to say, hey, I think we need to do this. What we really need to have happen is for that person to say it and somebody else then to be able to help enact it, or in some cases even have that very person be able to enact it. The next is to maintain an open dialogue about this. So safety and preparedness are things that tend to be on the forefront of our minds as an event is going on, and they tend to be very, very active and very dynamic situations as things are happening. And within the days that follow, we find that there's a decreasing and diminishing amount of concern that's then focused and sort of brought to the same conversation. And so what I'll challenge each of you to do is drop a note in your calendar or write a post-it down and remind yourselves when you come back from break to re-engage in this conversation about preparedness, about safety, about movement restriction, and about human-created emergencies. And frankly, it shouldn't stop there. You should also be using that time to think a little bit about natural disasters and other emergencies that can and do occur on and around your campus. Obviously, that's going to be different based on the campus that you're on, but no matter what, there are emergencies that can occur. Today certainly showed us that. And so remind yourselves and remind your communities that these are possibilities, and remind everybody to stay focused on them and keep that current throughout the rest of the school year and beyond. And finally, communicate. One of the things that we look at in every emergency is how much communication was there? Was there enough? Was there proper communication? Did folks want more communication than they got, or vice versa? And in a situation like today where there was never an actual threat to most of our campuses, but there was a potential perceived threat, and in fact there was a perceived threat to any campus in the LA area, it's important to make sure that we're communicating as much as is possible, but also as appropriately as possible. So I'll say that for the rest of the evening, there's probably only one more communication to go out, and that's the head of schools or somebody from your administration's voice that shares with the community that school is going to be open again tomorrow, it's going to be safe, and talks through some of the key changes if there are any for your campus. But then tomorrow or Thursday or perhaps even later on in the week or when you get back from break, continue that communication. And so remind folks that you are maintaining a high level of awareness and that you are ensuring that everybody is safe on a regular basis. And that's not to say it needs to continue weekly throughout the end of the year, but there should be at least one more communication when everybody gets back from break that says, hey, we're still thinking about this. We're still actively working on our preparedness. We're still conducting lockdown drills, shelter-in-place drills, secure campus drills, whatever that is. For many of you, the moulage drill is coming up, and so that's certainly an opportunity to communicate that you're preparing for a large-scale emergency, whether it's natural or human-created. Now, bringing it back to some more concrete next steps, we're ready for tomorrow. And as of now, again, it looks like we are at about 95% of LAUSD that's been swept and is determined clear. We are looking at a very good possibility, and I can't put a specific number on it, but I can tell you that LAUSD school police did say to me that unless something really big occurs this evening, we will be headed back to school tomorrow. And what that tells us is that really anybody else can do the same. And so we're headed back to school tomorrow. There are a couple of things that you can do. You can increase or manage the security that you've got in place. If you don't have security in place currently, or if you don't normally have a guard, you certainly can look at adding a guard. You certainly can look at increasing the number of guards that you have on campus if you already have them. And one of the things that a lot of you did today was to adjust your normal guard staffing. So if your guards were normally inside a booth or inside the gates, perhaps you moved them out. If your guards were normally patrolling campus and walking around, perhaps you moved them to the gates. And so you made a modification to the structure that both communicated and demonstrated preparedness and a readiness and awareness to respond, as well as the ability for you to be a little bit more nimble and act a little bit faster should something come up. And so if that's something that, again, if you've got a guard in place already and you can just supplement with some additional guards or some changes in staffing, more power to you. If not, if you don't have anybody in place tomorrow and the rest of the days through winter break, may be a good opportunity for you to explore what having a guard on campus might look like. And again, if your guard is currently armed, great. If your guard is not currently armed, great. My recommendation would be not to make a change between now and break, and frankly, for many of you, not even until the end of the year. The other component of this is to ensure that you're increasing awareness on campus. And so repeat the phrase, if you see something, say something. Ensure that your students and the rest of your community is on top of preparedness and is on top of the steps that they need to take in order to make sure that people are staying safe and are becoming safe if they're not already. I'd like to do a quick reminder. Secure campus, shelter in place, and lockdown are 3 stages of movement restriction, and we've talked about each of those a lot throughout this year. Today, many of you that were in school were either in a secure campus or a lockdown. A secure campus is a concept where we close the gates. Everybody who's on campus stays on campus. Everybody who's off campus stays off campus. It means we bypass deliveries. It means we bypass anybody that needs to come on. In most cases, that excludes the safety consultant. Everybody that's off campus is required to stay off, and we do some sort of modified dismissal. Just briefly, a shelter-in-place is generally thought of as a chemical response, but it's a step greater than our secure campus, where in addition to being on campus, the people who are on are actually in their classrooms, in their offices, and are stationary there. Depending on the degree of severity, a shelter-in-place may warrant the use of our lockdown kits and or may not. And then a lockdown is our most extreme, most restrictive movement restriction, and forces all of us into a classroom, into an office, into an area where we can truly be locked down and with lights off, silent, and waiting for next steps. Today, again, a number of you were in secure campus throughout the day, a number of you were in lockdown throughout the day. And all of you that were in school today were prepared to move back and forth between any of those stages as needed. Now, if you're not in the Southern California area, that doesn't mean that you can't use this opportunity to empower your community and also communicate out to your parents. And so if you're not from the Southern California area, I still would recommend that you put together an email. I don't think that you necessarily need to send out a voice message from your head or anything like that, especially if you're far enough away that you weren't impacted by today at all. But it would behoove you to send out a communication that lets your families know that you are prepared for an incident like this, lets your families know that you would either move into a secure campus or a lockdown in the event that you needed to, and or let your families know that you're just in general prepared for any type of movement restriction or human-created emergency on campus. So that message, if you need some help crafting, certainly you're welcome to reach out to us. We're happy to help you with it. But long story short should be, there was an event that occurred in LA today. What schools there did was either close campus or keep campus open based on what made the most sense for their community. In our community, we may or may not decide to keep school open or closed, but we do regularly practice our lockdown drills. We regularly practice our secure campus drills, and we're prepared for an event to occur. And again, if you need some help or are looking for some additional information about that, we're happy to help you out with those communications as well. And finally, as you have conversations with your staff and your faculty and your parents and students, and for each of you, which audiences you're communicating with may be different, but use the term empower, and not just in language that you're delivering, but in the mindset that you bring into the room. And ensure that every single person on campus can enact a lockdown should they need to. Ensure that every single person on campus knows who to go to in the event that they see something that doesn't make sense or see something that doesn't look right. And ensure that everybody on campus feels comfortable saying something, and again, they know who to say that to. That does it for our programmed agenda for today. However, I do want to share with you, and one of the things that we actually skipped this morning was the specifics of the threat. And so I will share with you just a couple of lines from the threat that was received at this point. We've been asked not to distribute it in full, and so we're not going to do that quite yet. My guess is in the next couple of days that it will be public, frankly, if it hasn't been leaked already. That being said, the most concerning points within the threat were a statement towards the end that said, if you cancel classes, the bombings will take place regardless, and we will bring our guns to the streets and offices of Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Bakersfield, and San Diego. That was actually the line that enlisted the response that we asked a lot of our schools to take. There was reference to 32 different people that would be involved, and there was reference to a difficult time within 4 years at a school, presumably a student. There was also reference to a number of different types of weapons and equipment that was on various campuses, and obviously at this point it sounds like at least 95% of those campuses have been cleared. So that being said, as soon as it is possible for us to release the entire threat, we certainly will do so, so that you can review it. And again, whether you made a decision to open or close today, you can assess whether you would do so having this information in the future. And you can also assess how you would act had you received this information or this threat directly. With that, again, I want to thank every one of you for being with us today. I want to thank, again, our safety consultants and appreciate all of the work that they did today and that they will continue to do over the course of the next several days to make sure that we get and keep you safe. And I want to thank all of you that jumped in and communicated with us and with each other, because one of the things that was really powerful today was schools communicating back and forth amongst one another and trying to make the best decision for themselves based on what schools in the area were doing. And so for all of you that made a call and said, this is what we're doing and here's why, I thank you for that as well. Finally, we will be sending an email out this evening that has some response or has some feedback on how you can talk with students, how you can suggest parents talk with students, and based on the age of the student, you may or may not be having a very different conversation. So it stands to reason that if you're talking to a 5-year-old, you're probably having a very different conversation than if you're talking to a 16, 17, 18-year-old. But we'll make sure that we give you some basic information about how to talk to both of those age groups as well as everybody in between. If you have any questions at all throughout the rest of the evening into the morning tomorrow, if you're a client, you already have access to our emergency line, so feel free to leverage that at any point 24/7. If you're not, you can call our office, and if somebody's here, we certainly will answer, and we'll probably do so tomorrow morning as well. And finally, if you have questions or concerns that haven't been answered yet, you can also email us at schools@joffeemergencyservices.com. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and take just a couple of questions it looks like have come in. Bear with me, I'm going to pull them all up, and then I'll run through and answer each of those. All right, and it looks like, Paula, there was a question about sending, the question was, we send that to all who participated or just clients? And I'm guessing that you're talking about the follow-up email, and we definitely will be sending that to all of the schools that are on this webinar as well as did register for this webinar. So anybody who is part of this conversation will definitely have access to that information. It'll be both suggested conversation for staff and faculty to have with students as well as for parents to have with students. And then we'll also have a script for you for your head or for somebody from your administration to deliver to parents ideally tonight. It's a great question. Beyond that, it looks like there are a couple other questions that we'll need to answer directly. And again, if anybody has questions that they're either not ready to ask or frankly haven't even come up yet, you're more than welcome to share those with us later this evening and or tomorrow, and we'll be happy to answer those. At this point, this will be the end of our emergency broadcast of information. So our next webinar or next address to our schools won't be until Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern. But at that point, we may provide a brief update as well if anything new has unfolded. And throughout the day tomorrow, we'll more than likely send an email or two to keep you in the loop about what's going on. Outside of that, if you have any questions, again, please feel free to share those with us. Thank you so much for your participation in this afternoon's webinar as well as this morning's, and thank you so much for the resilience that you as a community demonstrated today. It was truly impactful and pretty amazing to be able to see. So thank you for that, and we can't wait to talk with you on Thursday.